What's going on? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. We're going to go ahead and start early because I want to go ahead and wrap this up and get onto some other things. So what we're going to talk about is, why do you continue to face harassment as a worker? And primarily, we're going to be speaking to female workers, but this is a particular story that can kind of be relevant to male workers, but we want to kind of focus in on female workers because this is what this particular story is about that I'm going to kind of show you. So what I want to ask you is that make sure if you can hear me, hit me up in the chat, kind of let me know that you're getting my audio that is going through. And this is going to be a video for a person that is gainfully employed. They're working for somebody and they are tired of kind of dealing with what they have to deal with on the job on a day-to-day basis. And they kind of want to start asking themselves, why do they continue to put themselves through this? I'm not one of these kind of people that get on YouTube and I tell the people that, you're on the corporate plantation and things of that nature to try to get you to buy my particular course. By making you feel like because you work a 9-to-5, you got the worst situation in the world. Some people actually like their job. And there are also people that what they do would be very difficult for them to do without the workplace. So I've known people in my family that have work jobs and what they do professionally would be very difficult for them to do on their own or for them to do without that particular workplace because they don't have the ability to build out the infrastructure to do what they do. It's like I know a guy that works for NASA. What he does for NASA, he can't do on his own. So he would have to go do something else, but he can't do what he does because it takes billions of dollars of infrastructure building for him to do what he wants to do. So what I'm looking for is a person that is dissatisfied, right? I'm going after the person that is dissatisfied. If you're satisfied, I'm not here to try to make you dissatisfied. If you are content with what you have going on, I'm happy for you, and I would encourage you to keep pushing. I'm looking for the person that's dissatisfied and try to give them some other options because a lot of times we're not aware that other options exist. Okay, so what we see with a lot of our women is that they take these particular professions and what we find through studies, through data, through things of that particular nature, that they may deal with a lot of harassment on the job. And one of the reasons they deal with a lot of harassment on the job is because these are just how a lot of jobs work. So a lot of jobs are stressful, right? They're high stress environments. A lot of people don't know how to manage their stress properly. So what they do as a result is they lash out on each other. And then what happens is you're coming into work and the job has already been going extremely hard. It's been very busy that day. And a lot of times you're going into a pressure cooker. And you can often feel it a lot of times when you come in on the job that, I can already tell that this has been a very long day for a lot of people. Tensions are very, very high. We may be getting closer to the end of the week. A lot of people are worn down. And now they're more liable to start snapping at each other. And you see this on jobs all the time. When you're a woman and you have to deal with this, then you got to try to figure out how do I manage the situation properly, especially if it's coming from a man. And then two, how do you deal with the fact that you're not allowed to be a lot of times feminine in a lot of these professions because you're dealing with men all the time? And this is something I talked about before, is there's two places that really take femininity away from women. It's not a lot of times the relationship that the woman is in interpersonally. A lot of times it's the woman being incarcerated, one, and it's also the workplace. Because a lot of times a woman in her workplace, a lot of times has to conduct herself in a more masculine role to be successful in that particular workplace, especially if she's looking to have a long-term career or a long-term situation at that particular job. So I worked in healthcare, and I worked in healthcare for almost a decade at one time. And a lot of our female managers were very masculine. Why? Because they had to be to operate in that particular space. So over time, these women will become more and more masculine. Now, if you're a woman and you want to present masculine, I don't have a problem with that. That's your business. But a lot of women want to be feminine and masculine and kind of on a light switch type dynamic. And it could be difficult if you spend 8 or 9 hours a day in a masculine state or in a masculine frame to not leave and come home and try to be feminine, or to go on a date and try to be feminine. And you've been masculine and in a masculine particular frame for 8 or 9 hours, or you start getting into a particular routine of masculinity because that's what you got to do to be successful at your job, right? Now, if you just want to present masculine 24/7, that's your business. You can do that. Okay. So this is something that people really want to understand. And so what I do is I want to kind of show you this article of a story that kind of popped up that I saw about a woman that was being harassed on her job. And the question that I wanted to ask is that, what is the resolution for her on this problem? Okay. Because we got to start understanding how we've been socialized to conduct ourselves as human beings in this particular environment. So let me share the actual story with you real quick. And Erica, I really appreciate the shout outs to Erica Williams says, tell them Erica, we're going to go ahead and try to get into it. We're going to kind of share it out. So let me share the screen real quick. So let me make sure this is coming up. So this is a story. I recently saw it on the internet, and now it is kind of on social. So this is from Revolt. So we're going to give credit to revolttv.com. Make sure they get their journalistic credit. There was a scenario where this woman's manager was fired after the co-worker was kind of calling her out of her name and harassing her. Now, I've worked in quick serve. I worked in food service. It's very stressful. It's very stressful. It's a very hard-working, low-pay job. And what it does, it attracts low-skilled people, people with very little education, also people that don't come from necessarily the best background. But that's not all the time, because I don't think I came from a bad background. But I worked in quick serve. But a lot of times you get these people working in quick serve, and they're not necessarily the kind of people that you would normally look to conduct themselves the best way all the time. There's a lot of times very low standards to bring these people in the door. And so you got this female, this woman that's trying to move up the ladder. Her name is Sophia Cargill. And there was a video that came out on social media. You go look it out. It's on YouTube. I don't necessarily want to play it. And we talk about that assistant manager went viral for calling her the B word. Also, he called her communist, said she was the B word, said she was lazy, because they were arguing over who was going to clean up this particular restaurant. Now, one of the biggest things you got to worry about when you're working at a restaurant is you're always doing cleanup. You're doing cleanup for health reasons, but you're also doing cleanup for anybody knows if you're in a place where you're doing a lot of cooking, it gets really, really dirty. So you're constantly cleaning. So cleaning is something that you're preoccupied with all the time. And then you can't close that store until you meet a particular standing of cleaning, because why? You don't want the opening person to have to try to clean before they open. You want them to be able to open and get going. So a lot of times cleaning is a real, real big part of that particular job. So I guess they was arguing over who was going to clean up. And then as a result, situation got very high level. He started yelling out these insults. Now, this is what I want to ask you. If you have women in your family, why would you want them to have to deal with this kind of scenario just to make money? And then if you have women in your family and they're trying to move up this particular ladder of employment in this particular place, and they have to deal with a man calling them out of their name, right? How do you think that affects them off the job, right? So you're taking the women in your family, you're telling them, hey, you can go work these particular jobs, right? Because we haven't built anything for you as a woman. We haven't developed anything for you as a woman in our family. So you can go take these jobs where you now have to get into these encounters with grown men. They're treating you like a man, right? You're being spoken to like you're a man. He doesn't understand. I necessarily probably shouldn't be talking to her like that. He doesn't have that kind of background. How do you think it affects them long term for her to have to keep going into these particular environments? And that's a question I want to ask the people that are watching this particular video. If you have women in your family and they have to deal with this, how do you think that affects them long term? If they got to deal with this day in and day out? Because these are the kind of questions that we're not asking, right? So then if she has to deal with this long term, how does it affect her behavior? Because she has to endure this, and then now she has to go home and then try to conduct herself a different way. So that's the question I want to ask the actual audience. How do you think it affects them long term? And no answer is going to be the wrong answer, okay? So the issue is that she's dealing with this. Now, what she did was she said she reached out to Wendy's about the issue because she recorded it. They suspended her initially. I think she was unpaid. And then they investigated, but I think because it was on social media is where it started getting some traction. And then Wendy's decided to do something about it. She also got a GoFundMe page. She put up around $14,000, right? The question you want to ask yourself is, why does she have to go through all of this just to work at Wendy's? At the end of the day, it's a Wendy's job. So why would a woman think I have to do all of this due diligence? I got to cover my tail. I got to CYA, yada, yada, yada. Why does she need to go through all of this just to work at Wendy's? So I don't know what a Wendy's manager makes. Let me see. Can I look that up? What is the salary for a Wendy's manager? Right? So Wendy's salary manager, right? What do they make to where she needs to go through all of that? Okay, so I got it on Glassdoor and ZipRecruiter that they make between $23K and $91K per year. And I probably, so they says, Glassdoor says the typical Wendy's store manager is around $50,000 per year, right? But they can get up to 90 probably based on what market they're particularly in. So then the question is, why does she think she needs to go through all of that just to, right, stay at Wendy's? Why does she need to go through all of that just to work that Wendy's job? And it's because the men around her have not developed anything for her to do anything else outside of that. So she now has to figure this out. Or she's being rebellious and she doesn't want to deal with what the men have built. So she's deciding to go on her own, and we're going to kind of go into that also. But either way, how is this a good situation for her? So Erica Williams says that she believes that the result of this is stress, loss of hair, masculinity, heart attacks, but men don't want to hear. She's exactly right. Right? It's stress, hair loss, masculinity, heart attacks. Because do we think that a woman can deal with the stress of these high stress environments in which she not only has to work, but she has to deal with all of this masculine energy from men? And this is something women have to understand. And even though we in a different era, you're not supposed to say these type of things. Men are better at being masculine than women, right? Women are different in the way in which they handle things, right? So even if a woman is violent, she goes about it a different way than a man does. But men are better at being masculine than women. And so there's a particular type of presentation and an attitude that a man can take with a woman that a lot of women are not going to be able to deal with long term. Some men can't deal with it long term. So when you look at when Kwame Brown talked about all the things that he dealt with when he went to go play for the Washington Wizards, and how he was working him out for 3 hours before practice and telling him to play in the game, and then Mike was talking to him all crazy in practice, yada yada yada. A lot of women wouldn't be able to deal with that type of really what it was low key was hazing. They wouldn't be able to deal with that. They would have a nervous breakdown. But Kwame Brown, because he was a male, right, trying to work his way into being a man, he understood was an expectation of these men is I just got to take this, right? I just got to take it. I got to take it on the chin and I got to deal with it because I'm supposed to show these men that I can deal with this level of aggression, this level of hazing, this level of mistreatment. These are the kind of things that you got to deal with. And he's doing all of this just to work there, right? It's a job. Just because you play NBA ball, it's a job. So you're doing all of this just to work there. A story that a lot of people don't talk about is that when Kobe was drafted by the Lakers, Shaq wanted to haze him so bad that Jerry West had to go to Shaq and tell him, you got to stop dealing with Kobe like that, right? Because Shaq was trying to haze him so bad. So if you're a woman and you're dealing with this type of stuff, and you see this in a lot of professions, where as a junior person, you go into these particular professions and you get hazed very hard by the men that are senior in your particular profession. Okay. It's just the environment that has been developed before you ever got there. You just, people call it taking your lumps. You got to take your lumps. Some people call it eating the S word. You just got to deal with this. So then if you put a woman into this same environment, this is the culture of the environment. And then we're telling the men, well, you can't deal with a woman that way because she's a woman. So they feel like, okay, well, she's getting a pass. But then if you make the woman deal with it, then what is it doing to her as a woman to where she has to deal with all of this behavior? Because really the men shouldn't have to deal with it. But we're telling the women now that they have to also deal with it. And so then you have this woman where she feels like she has to deal with this type of behavior just to move up the corporate ladder. Okay. So sympathetic fight, flight, dominance. Natasha, if you could expand on that a little bit better, I would appreciate it. So men are better at confrontation and emotional involved when you're dealing with hostile environments. So Mr. Shavers, I think men may be better at physical confrontation, right? But I've also known some men that are physically non-confrontational. But I don't necessarily think that a woman can deal with it. Even if a woman thinks she's confrontational, I don't think she can deal with a confrontational man. I think she may think that till she has to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. And then over time, it can start to grind you down because the way we socialize men in this society is totally different than how we socialize women. So growing up, I've been through anything and everything because this is part of just growing up with other guys, right? So I was the kind of person to where if I thought I was going to have a problem with you and I knew you was at the end of the block, my brain is so messed up. I'm coming for you because I'm going to show you I'm not walking in the other direction. But I would never expect no women to act like that. But I came up at an early age realizing that if somebody's trying to give you a problem, the way I was conditioned, I'm going to run to you. I ain't going to run from you. But I wouldn't expect a woman to deal with that because I don't think she can deal with that kind of environment day in and day out. But I'm just so wild in my head that if I know me and you got a problem, I would literally find you and get next to you because I wanted to see how you was going to react to it. Right? Because me being me, I feel like I'm going to try to escalate the situation because I'm going to show you I'm not scared of you. Right? But I don't know what I want the women in my family in that kind of environment where they had to make those kind of decisions on a day in and day out basis just to make a living. To me, that's kind of something that I think a lot of men can be men can deal with better psychologically. And then also it may not be the best environment for a man psychologically, because we have men that have been worn down from very, very high stress environments with a lot of really aggressive, confrontational, competitive men. It's not always the best for everybody, because what you can do is you can end up in a Shark Tank, right? So in this environment with these Wendy's manager, look at what she's having to go through to get this particular situation resolved. Then she's saying she's unaware or unsure if she will return to work at Wendy's after being traumatized by harassment. She believes that it's systemic, right? I don't necessarily know it's systemic. I just think it's a byproduct of that particular industry, right? I think it's a byproduct of that particular industry. And I also think it's the fact that these people kind of know the fact that you're working here is that the men in your family may have not developed anything else for you. So then they don't have a lot of regard for you, because they may feel like, well, you know what, this is a place for men. So what I want to ask any woman that feels like I got to work in these particular environments, the first question I want to ask them is, what are my questions at? Are you acting out of desperation? If you're a woman and you feel like, you know what, I got to go into this professional environment in which men are going to not necessarily be respectful of me, it's wearing me down psychologically, it's just grating on me, it's very high stress. Are you acting out of desperation? Do you feel like I don't have anything else I can do? This is all I can do to make money, right? I come from a particular background where I can't do anything else. That's the first question you want to ask yourself. Am I doing this out of desperation? Because I think this woman is acting out of desperation, right? I don't think she knows what else to do besides this, okay? The next question you want to ask yourself is this my identity? So what we've done in this particular society is we've got a lot of women to buy into this idea that their identity is this professional working woman, right? Is this their identity? Is this, I'm this professional working woman? A lot of y'all gonna be too young to remember this. There was a show used to come on TV long, long time ago. Even when I was a kid, it was an old show, but I was watching reruns called Mary Tyler Moore. And Mary Tyler Moore was this TV show with like this professional white woman working in the city, had her own apartment, had her own situation. She wasn't really trying to get married. She was just trying to move up into the corporate world. Wasn't a bad show, but it was kind of showing how attitudes about women in the 70s was changing. And so what it's done is we socialize a lot of women to believe that their identity is this professional woman, this boss chick, I'm in control, yada, yada, yada. And they want to really ask themselves is that, who does that identity benefit? Now, see, me, because I see things, yeah, Erica says they call it boss chick. Exactly. So they call it the boss chick. So who does this particular identity benefit? And what you got to really understand is that capitalism desires to turn everybody into a worker. So if you can go into a time machine and we could go back 150 years ago, we would see people on plantations and everybody would be working. The man would be working, the child would be working, right? Everybody would be working. The woman would be working. If we was to go into the north and go into some of the inner cities, we started getting a lot of those Irish and Italian migrations to America. Why did they come over? They needed labor. And the man was working, the woman was working, and even the child was working. Because capitalism desires to turn everybody into labor, because capitalism desires surplus labor so they can push labor costs down. So to me, this whole movement of getting women to work is not really a byproduct of feminism. It's really a byproduct of capitalism. Because what does? It increases the surplus labor pool. Because that particular job that this woman is trying to get, a man is not competing with a woman for that job. And I don't want people to think that I'm saying this from a negative standpoint. But what I want you to understand is that a lot of women have been socialized to be empowered working out of the house. They've been socialized that is empowering. But in reality, you're just benefiting the capitalist structure. Because who owns Wendy's? So outside of the shareholders, who actually owns that company? This is who this woman is really working for. So she's making these people more successful, but she's dealing with all of the stress. So if you're a Wendy's shareholder, this woman, right, is making you more successful. She's making your family wealthier, but she's taking all of the stress on. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So what we've done is we convince a lot of women that their identity, their sense of accomplishment, right, their sense of independence, right, their sense of autonomy should come from the fact that they are a professional person working outside of the house then once they get in these particular environments, they should look to move up the corporate ladder. And I'm not saying that it's a negative if a woman decides to do that. What I'm saying is that why does she feel like her identity is attached to this particular success? Because in most situations, she's not making her family really successful. Whoever owns that particular organization, she's making their family. And it's just something I learned from women like Erica Williams, but I've also learned from other women, is that if you look at the families of the people that own that particular business that you're working in, they don't let the women in their family work. The women in their family are sitting at home, taking care of the house, taking care of the children. But they got everybody else's woman inside that particular business working. So you want to kind of understand, based on our identity, why do so many women think this is their identity? And I'm not saying that you can't work. I'm not against women moving up. There was a sister that became I want to say a general in the Marines. It might have been a brigadier general. She was the first woman to get to that particular level in the Marines. I was happy for her because I know what she probably had to do as far as the hours that she had to put in to get to that level. But there's also a major sacrifice to get to that level. There's a lot that you're going to have to put on the altar to get to that level. And the question is, why do you feel like you want to do that? Third question, how does you working like that help your family? How is your family benefiting from you working like that? Because if you look at this particular woman, she's leaving the house to go work, and she has children. Her children either at daycare or they home by themselves. So if you understand as a young person how some of your decisions are going to put you in this situation where you got to go work these low-paid jobs, these low-skilled jobs around these nasty people, but I say nasty, I mean from an attitude standpoint, just to support yourself, just to make money. How does it help you? How does it help your family? And so this is what a lot of times people don't understand, is we've allowed this particular system to get a lot of people to buy into this particular identity because it benefits the overall system. System always needs more workers. It's going to need more workers next year than they got today. It's going to need more workers in 10 years than they got today. Why? Because that's the only way we're going to keep pushing labor costs down. So we've seen in this society already, if we got to turn the woman into a worker, we will. If we got to turn the child into a worker, she will. The reason why organized labor wanted child worker laws is because they wanted to extract that particular ability for the bosses to make that surplus labor. Because there was a time when you can go into factories in this country and you would see 8 and 9-year-old children working in factories. That's a real life scenario. So when I worked as a teenager in grocery, there was a limitation of how many hours I could work. Why? Because they didn't want me to become competitive with adults for working those particular hours. So during the school week, I could only work like so many hours, and I could work more hours on the weekend, but they could not work me like a grown person. Organized labor pushed that through because they didn't want grown men having to compete with children for jobs. So we're living in a system that really wants to turn everybody into labor. So then as a woman, what is the byproduct of this particular system turning you just into more surplus labor for the system? How does it really benefit you? And so this is why, we're going into a commercial for what I do, is why I'm so enthusiastic about teaching women how to trade, is because they can trade at home. They don't have to worry about some a-hole working with, calling them out of their name, calling them a communist, calling them lazy because they didn't clean the way they wanted them to clean. They can make money on their own inside their particular house. They don't have to deal with other men in what they do. If you got a brokerage account, there is no man involved in that. So you don't have the influence of these other men on the mental mind state of the women in your family. They can make enough money to where it doesn't occupy all their time. Because if you want to move into management in these particular jobs, you literally got to sacrifice yourself to the job. I know a woman that was a manager at the largest retailer in the country. She worked around 11 to 12 hours every day when she had to work. So she got her 2 days off. But when she was working, she worked 11 to 12 hours. She pretty much a lot of times opened and almost closed that particular location. Why? Because that's their demand for management. She was a woman with 5 children. So what is the sacrifice on her 5 kids while she's managing this particular location for this family of billionaires? What is the sacrifice? So how does her children ever become billionaires if they never get the development, right, to where they can now have new opportunities because the person that's taking care of them is spending all their time out of the house. So yeah, they got the financial resources, but they never get the personal development from their parent. You understand me? So this is kind of how everybody stays in the same place, but the people that create the organization, they continue to move up in life. So this is why I'm so enthusiastic about what I'm teaching. A lot of women that have come through my particular program have had a lot of success. And one of the most successful things is that they don't have to leave the house to make money. they don't have to deal with a lot of men with a lot of aggressive personalities to make money, right? Because when you're dealing with women in the workplace, and I know this for a fact, one thing I learned is I never argue with a woman on the job because it's going to always turn out the wrong way. So when a woman says something to me at work, I just say, okay, cool. Because I'm not going to argue with you. Especially never argue with a young woman at work. Going to always turn out the wrong way. But a lot of men don't have that ability to govern their behavior. So they want to show the woman that they're boss. So as soon as they get into an argument with the woman at work, they act like they're dealing with a man. You feel me? So that's a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. And so what we're doing is we're continuing to telling young women to go into these particular areas, right? To go in these particular areas to try to find their identity, try to find their independence, to try to find their autonomy. Because you don't never want to depend on a man, even though you're depending on men all the time. If you drive down the highway system, you're depending that men actually built that highway properly. It's not going to kill you. If you're flying in a plane, you're depending that men actually created that plane properly. So the plane doesn't fall apart when it gets into the stress of trying to get altitude. You're depending on men all the time. So this attitude that you want to be independent of men is really an artificial attitude because you are always dependent upon men. I'm dependent upon other men. I'm dependent that the people that put this particular building that I'm in, that they built it the right way so the roof don't fall on top of my head. A guy fixed my car the other day. I'm dependent upon that he fixed my car properly so my car don't fall apart on the highway. So we're all dependent upon each other on some level. It's just degrees of independence or dependence upon each other. But this idea that we're going to continue to push women into the workplace, and as a result, they're going to find their independence and their identity and autonomy, to me is really, really detrimental to women, especially long term. And it's something that a lot of women really need to examine. Where are they going with this? Okay. And so you see this scenario. I've seen this a lot of times in quick serve. This is not anything unique. Women deal with a lot of harassment. They deal with a lot of sexual harassment. They deal with a lot of negative behavior because they are put in a lot of situations that are not necessarily healthy for them. And a lot of times they're made to believe that they just got to try to deal with it. Okay. And so that's why I want you to look into, let me go ahead and put my little banner up real quick. If you're a woman and you want to try to look into something new, or you a man, you got women in your family, check out the highest paid part-time job in the world.com. And it really is an options trading course that I can really show you how you can monetize your time. You can make money sitting home on your butt. You can spend time with your family, and you don't have to deal with the stress of the aggravation, the confrontation that you got to deal with a lot of men. You don't have to deal with your femininity be taken away from you. But whether you deal with my particular program or not, as a woman, you really need to start examining, right? Why do you feel like you have to do all these particular things, right? To benefit yourself and your situation? Is it because you're desperate? Is it because it's your identity? And start asking yourself, how does this help your family? Okay, so that's pretty much what we're going to be for the conversation. If you know somebody that can get value from it, share it out. This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. Have a great weekend. Talk to you later.